This is Friday, April the 16th. This is American history. Well, yesterday we learned that Lyndon Johnson became President of the United States when John Kennedy was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson began life as a school teacher. After graduating from a teacher college, he went to the Texas Hill Country, that's where Austin is today, and he became a teacher. He became part of the New Deal, and it was the New Deal that will shape his life during his presidency. Johnson continued the legacy of the Kennedy administration when it came to integration. He will propose and Congress will pass the Voting Rights Act of 1963 and the next year, 1964. But 1964 is a presidential election year. Now, Johnson had come in second to Kennedy in the 1960 nomination, and so Johnson was easily nominated by the Democrats. The Republicans will turn to Barry Goldwater. Barry Goldwater was a very conservative Republican. The red states are Mr. Goldwater. The blue states are Mr. Johnson. Now, notice that the states that at one time had been part of the Confederacy have gone Republican. They will continue to go to Republican to this very day. Now, Johnson, in his campaign for presidency, said he wanted to be reelected. He wanted to mount a war on poverty. Now, Johnson had grown up teaching young Hispanics from the hill country of Texas, and this deeply affected him. In Johnson's first full term, Johnson is going to propose to Congress what is called the Great Society. Now, to prove that the Great Society was needed, Johnson is going to go into the Appalachian Mountain region of the United States. This is considered one of the poorest sections of the United States. And here, Johnson is going to highlight who the poor are and what the poor need. And in his Great Society, he is going to hammer out bill after bill after bill that will help out the poor. This video here deals with the Great Society and some of the bills that were passed. It was during Johnson's term that he fulfilled Roosevelt's plan to provide Medicare, that is health for the aged, and Medicaid, that is health for the poor. He signed the law and he gave the ceremonial pen to Harry Truman. Now, Harry Truman had tried to get Medicare and Medicaid passed, but he was unsuccessful. One of Lady Bird's big projects was Head Start. Head Start is a program for those individuals who are not old enough to go to school, but whose schooling would do them good. So if you are in the second or third or fourth, 4 years old, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years old, your Head Start program will teach you things like colors. It will teach you your ABCs. It will teach you your 1, 2, 3s. I would venture to guess that for those of you who went to daycare, you probably had Head Start money used to help you with this as well. Johnson is going to continue the interstate highway system. The interstate highway system had begun under Eisenhower and had gotten bigger under Kennedy and will be at its greatest amount of road building during the Johnson administration. Now, Johnson wanted to do more, but he was derailed by two events. In 1964, 4 North Vietnamese gunboats attacked an American destroyer in the Gulf of Tonkin. The U.S. said that this was an act of war, and Johnson asked for U.S. troops to go to South Vietnam to fight, not as advisors, but to fight. This became known as the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. In 1965, a group of protesters led by Martin Luther King is going to try to march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery. They are going to be met by angry whites and the police, and quite a few of them are going to be beaten into unconsciousness. Now, Johnson proposed that Governor Wallace give these protesters protection. And when Governor Wallace said no, Johnson addressed the nation. And in a speech, he promised to give federal troops to protect the marchers. And he ended with the phrase, "and we shall overcome." Now, "we shall overcome" is a term that was used by many of the protesters to show that Johnson had backed them. As the protesters would march, they would sing hymns. And one of the hymns was, "and we shall overcome." Now, Johnson became plagued by protesters who felt that he wasn't moving fast enough. So Johnson was caught between a rock and a hard place. If he didn't move fast enough, there were blacks who admonished him. If he moved too fast, there were whites who admonished him. This is the beginning of the splitting up of the black movement. Now, Dr. King spoke for those who believed in nonviolence. Now, this picture here is Stokely Carmichael. Stokely Carmichael believed that if blacks were to use violence, they could achieve their goals much faster. Others who promoted violence was Malcolm X, Huey Newton, and Bobby Seals. Each of them were leaders of particular groups that again called for protest and violence to get what was needed. Now, Carmichael, Newton, and Seal began to promote what they called Black Power. Now, Black Power is the belief that blacks must look out for blacks. And so in inner cities, youth organizations were begun by blacks because they said that the whites did not understand the situation and that the whites were not working hard enough for the black community. Carmichael, Newton, and Seal will propose the Black Panther. Now, the Black Panthers believed that a lot of the problems in the city were caused by the police. The police were mainly white and had a bad habit of shooting blacks. In 1965, in Watts, which is in the eastern part of Los Angeles, 2 black youth were shot in the back by 2 white officers. This began what became known as the Watts riots. Now, this particular video talks about the Watts riots and how blacks and whites battled each other. It was during the Johnson administration that the Supreme Court is going to talk about the case of Loving versus Virginia. Now, the Lovings were a married couple. One was black, one was white. In the state of Virginia, this was illegal. And when they came to Virginia to live, they were arrested. They were thrown in jail. They went to the Supreme Court and said that this is not right. The Supreme Court will vote unanimously that interracial marriage can occur. And because of this, it was a groundbreaking law for integration. This is a deeper dive into Loving versus Virginia. Hispanics, led by Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez is the gentleman on the right, are beginning to propose strikes against those who own the fields. Now, most Hispanics would go out and pick the fruit or pick the vegetable, and they would be paid by the piece. But a lot of times, the owners would not pay the workers what they had promised to pay them. Cesar Chavez is going to organize the Hispanics into a strike. Now, white Americans were asked to support this by not eating certain vegetables. Now, what is interesting in this picture is the gentleman who is in the middle. Now, the gentleman in the middle is Bobby Kennedy. He is John Kennedy's brother. He had been Attorney General of the United States in the Kennedy administration, had begun as Attorney General in the Johnson administration, but Johnson and Bobby Kennedy had had a falling out. Bobby Kennedy is going to become U.S. Senator from the state of New York, and there are many people who say that Kennedy is going to oppose Johnson in the 1968 Democratic primary. At the Times, migrant Hispanics are going to receive more money. Chavez is going to call for immigration reform. Chavez is going to be called for all children, regardless of whether they are illegal or not, to be educated. Chavez proposed that anybody, legal or illegal, be able to gain public housing. Now, these are laws that are still on the books today. Many women were not satisfied with staying at home. Women believed that economically they needed to provide for their family. A lot of times, women would not be hired if they were married and their husbands worked. Now, the lady who is carrying the sign, "Women Need Constitutional Equality," she is Betty Friedan. Betty Friedan is going to write a book called The Feminine Mystique. The Feminine Mystique is going to outline the problems that women faced and how women can solve these problems. Now, this video here deals with Betty Friedan. Many women agreed, and on college campuses, women began to join the struggle. Women began to call for equal pay for equal work. Women began to call for women being allowed to enroll in professional schools like doctors, dentists, veterinarians, architecture, something that women had been denied up to this point. Women are going to begin to challenge state laws that dealt with reproductive rights. At first, the laws dealt mostly with birth control. But after winning birth control, many women are going to challenge laws that deal with abortion. I think this would probably be a pretty good time for us to stop today. Now, on Tuesday, we are going to look at the Vietnam War and the problems that that is going to cause for Johnson. And then most likely on Wednesday, we will be looking at the 1968 presidential election, an election that is very important to this country. My feeling is either Thursday or Friday of next week, we're probably looking at a quiz. Now, it is important that you do well on this quiz. Remember that as soon as the quiz is out, our projects will be due just about a week later. So please make sure that you're working on your projects.